Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I never thought I'd be trapped in a government building, watching the streets of downtown Denver dissolve into chaos through bulletproof glass. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a survivalist. I'm just a systems analyst, a guy who checks server logs and updates firewall protocols for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. My name is Evan Mathers. I'm 34 years old. On June 10th, at 8:03 a.m., I parked my Ford Escape in the usual spot, level B3 in the Capitol Complex parking garage on Sherman Street, and walked into the lab annex with my coffee still too hot to drink. At that point, the only thing bothering me was the weird push notification I got from the FEMA alert system on my phone. Just one word: prepare. At the time, I chalked it up to a test message, or maybe a glitch. I've seen weird things in the systems before: ghost packets, duplicated pings, false flags. I took the elevator up to the third floor and flashed my badge to get past the security gate. When I stepped into the server room, the hum of the machines felt comforting, familiar, safe. But safety is a fragile illusion. By 9:16 a.m., our department's internal comms went dark. At first, we thought it was a network outage. Happens sometimes, especially when the state decides to run surprise drills. But our backup lines were dead too. When we tried calling out on our personal phones, the signal was jammed or completely offline. I checked the log servers. Nothing. Not a blip since 9:11 a.m. That was the exact timestamp of the last entry. CDC_query_failure. External nodes not responding. By 9:32 a.m., our building went into lockdown. That wasn't standard protocol. Dr. Elena Ruiz was the first to sense something was wrong. She wasn't just our department head. She was also a former CDC liaison and a pandemic response veteran. She'd been through SARS, H1N1, and the early waves of COVID, the kind of woman who didn't scare easily. She pulled me aside in the hallway outside the conference room. "Elena, the system's frozen. Full server disconnect," I told her, showing her the logs on my Surface tablet. She barely looked at the screen. Her eyes were fixed on her phone, scrolling through encrypted text updates I couldn't see. "Start air-gapping the internal servers. Full isolation. No VPN, no LAN links," she said. "You think this is a cyber attack?" "No, I think we just lost Atlanta." I froze. "The CDC?" She nodded, her mouth a tight line. "And possibly Emmitsburg." That's when I realized how serious it was. Emmitsburg is where the National Emergency Training Center is located, home of FEMA. If both those places went dark within the same hour, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a test. Something had happened. Something catastrophic. By 10:07 a.m., we watched the first video. It was sent via internal hardline by one of the National Guard liaisons stationed 3 floors below us. His name was Staff Sergeant Marcus Quinn, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He'd walked up from the sub-basement, used a bypass key to get into our locked floor, and dropped a hardened USB drive on Elena's desk. "No digital copies. Watch this once, then destroy it." The file was a body cam recording. Footage from a recon team in Commerce City, about 7 miles northeast of us. The timestamp said 6:43 a.m. In the footage, 4 soldiers in urban camo entered a partially looted Walgreens. Shelves overturned. Blood smears on the floor. No bodies, but the glass doors had been shattered inward, like something broke in, not out. Then came the sound. A dry, rattling exhale, almost a wheeze. One of the soldiers shouted a warning. But it was already too late. Something lunged from behind the pharmacy counter. Thin, gaunt, eyes cloudy, skin pale like parchment and hanging loose in folds. It bit one of the soldiers through his collar. The others fired instantly, muzzle flashes, screaming. The creature went down, but then the bitten soldier, Private Daniel Riker, as we later found out, started seizing on the ground. The footage ended there, abrupt, no fade-out, just static. Transmission method unknown, Elena muttered, but the incubation time, less than 4 minutes. She ordered the building sealed. The biohazard shutters locked into place with a metallic boom that echoed through the hallways. Our building wasn't meant to be a shelter. It was a lab and administrative center. No stockpiled food, no sleeping quarters, but we had a reinforced basement and partial access to the state's emergency radio network. At 11:22 a.m., Sergeant Quinn confirmed the word being passed between guard units. Vector Z. It wasn't a pathogen in the traditional sense. No known viral markers. Nothing airborne. The transmission vector seemed to require bodily fluids, bites, scratches, and the infected showed signs of extreme aggression and neurochemical overload like adrenaline spiked beyond fatal levels. They don't stop, Quinn said. Not from wounds, only brain trauma disables them. We weren't supposed to call them what they were, not on the record, but everyone in the room was thinking it. They were the walking dead. By noon, we had 24 people inside the building. 12 administrative staff, 4 scientists, 5 IT specialists, 1 guard liaison, 2 janitors. We sealed the lower stairwells, used filing cabinets to barricade the emergency exits, and turned the break room into a food ration center. We had maybe a week's worth of vending machine snacks and water bottles. Elena organized everyone into rotating watches. Quinn issued sidearms from the basement security lockers. Glock 17S, standard state issue. I'd never even held one before. Don't think of it as a weapon, Quinn told me. Think of it as a backup plan. What kind of backup? In case the ones outside get in. I didn't believe it at first. I thought this would pass, that a cure or response unit would arrive. But when night fell, and the city lights didn't come on, and the distant sounds of sirens turned into something more guttural, like screams muffled by static, I stopped hoping. Around 9 p.m., I climbed up to the top floor and peeked through the narrow slit windows above the atrium. You could see the Civic Center Park from up there. It used to be full of joggers and food trucks. Now, it looked like something out of a nightmare. Fires flickered in the trees. Cars sat empty in the intersections. And people, no, not people anymore, moved in the streets without purpose. Shambling, twitching. Some crawled, some ran in sudden bursts, chasing phantom prey. I recognized the statue in the park. The bronze of the pioneer family, the one with the mother reaching forward and the child clutching her leg. Someone had splashed it with red paint, or at least I hoped it was paint. Then something looked up at me, one of the creatures. It had been standing still beneath a tree, its head cocked like a dog sniffing the air. Its eyes were milky, but its nose flared. It growled, and then it sprinted toward the building. I jumped back, nearly cracking my head on the window frame. The security shutters were already down, and the entrance doors were reinforced steel. But the sound it made when it slammed against the side of the building, I still hear it now. A hollow, echoing thud, followed by snarling and clawing. By midnight, there were at least 30 of them outside. We didn't sleep. Elena kept us on alert rotation, 3 hours on, 3 off. I sat next to the server stack with the Glock on my lap and the emergency radio tuned to static. Occasionally, there'd be a burst of signal. Fragmented speech. District breach, hospital compromised, request extraction, and silence again. Around 3:17 a.m., the generator failed. We'd been running emergency power since the grid died, but the backup fuel ran dry faster than we expected. Probably because of the HVAC system. We hadn't shut down the labs on the second floor, and those draw serious power. The building plunged into total darkness, save for emergency glow strips and a few battery-powered lanterns. Quinn and I went down to the basement to check the generator. The air smelled like burning oil. We found the unit intact, but the fuel reserve was empty, and the auto feeder line had corroded at the coupling. Possibly sabotage, or maybe just bad maintenance. Either way, we were out of power, and worse, our electronic locks had defaulted to security mode. That meant permanently sealed, unless we forced them open manually, loudly. We climbed back up to the third floor, where Elena was coordinating people with handwritten notes and a flashlight taped to the ceiling. She didn't panic. She didn't even flinch. She handed me a clipboard and told me to take inventory of all emergency rations. "I think we're going to need to make a decision soon," she said. "Either we hold tight and hope for contact, or we evacuate." Where would we even go? She pointed to the map on the wall, one of those oversized emergency response maps used during blizzards and forest fires. It was laminated, outdated in some areas, and stuck with colored pushpins that marked former disaster response centers across the greater Denver metropolitan area. Her index finger hovered over a red dot pinned along the western edge near the foothills. "The Colorado National Guard Readiness Center," she said. "Golden." Golden was close, just off the US 6 corridor, tucked in near the School of Mines campus and a mile or so from the Coors Brewery complex. I remembered it vaguely from my college years. The Armory sat beside South Golden Road, built like a squat block of concrete and brick with reinforced bay doors, antenna arrays, and a separate comms building. If anyone in the state had the infrastructure and capacity to ride this out, it would be them. But getting there meant driving blind through city streets now crawling with infected, past potential roadblocks, and risking open ground. Still, staying in the Capitol building meant slow starvation and inevitable breach. While Elena and Sergeant Quinn quietly debated the logistics of evacuation, I busied myself with inventory. We had 42 bottles of water, 3 cases of protein bars, a half crate of MREs left over from a forgotten civil preparedness program, and whatever snacks remained in the vending machines. Counting and organizing helped me think. It created the illusion of control. By 4 a.m., the rest of the team was awake. No one had slept well. Most of us had migrated to the conference room, now serving as a de facto operations hub. The room's whiteboard was filled with sketches of floor plans, maps, and scribbled notations. Quinn had laid out a detailed route to the Armory on Golden Road, avoiding major choke points like Spear Boulevard and Federal Avenue. The plan was to travel west through Colfax, shift onto 6th Avenue and cut down through smaller residential streets to reach the edge of the city. Low visibility, less foot traffic, fewer infected, hopefully. The building had 4 fleet vehicles, 2 of which were inoperable due to deferred maintenance. Of the remaining 2, one was a Chevy Suburban and the other a Dodge Durango, both fitted with state plates, light bars, and reinforced bumpers. With a little gas siphoned from lower levels, they'd run, but the Suburban had a dead battery. That left us with the Durango. We couldn't fit 24 people in one SUV, not safely. "We'll send a recon group first," Elena said, her voice low but firm. 4 of us. We reach the Armory, confirm if it's secure, and call back via radio. "And if it's not secure?" someone asked. A new hire. I think his name was Jay, young and wide-eyed, clearly not built for this kind of stress. "Then we come back and refortify here," Quinn said. The silence that followed was heavy. No one wanted to be part of the recon team, but everyone understood the necessity. Elena volunteered first. She was the ranking official. Quinn was second, military background, weapons trained, and coldly pragmatic. The third was a woman named May Park, a field virologist from CSU assigned to our team for a rotating 3-month study. Despite her slight build and quiet demeanor, she had sharp eyes and a calm disposition. She'd grown up in Seoul and worked through outbreaks before. She was the only one who didn't flinch when the body cam footage played. The fourth person was me. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't want to go. But when Quinn looked around the room and no one else moved, I realized it had to be someone with basic systems knowledge. If the armory still had functioning communication gear, someone would need to know how to patch in or reinitialize the networks. That was my skill set. We suited up in the sub-basement. There wasn't much tactical gear to go around, but the basement had enough surplus National Guard equipment to improvise. Quinn handed each of us a bulletproof vest, ear radios, and small packs loaded with emergency supplies: water, flashlights, trauma kits. Each of us was issued a weapon: Glock 17 pistols, and for Quinn, an M4 carbine with iron sights and a sling. He carried it like it was part of him. I checked the pistol 3 times. It felt heavy, unnatural in my hand. I'd never fired one before. We moved out just after 5 a.m. The sun hadn't risen yet, but a faint gray haze crept along the eastern horizon. The silence outside was unnatural. No birdsong, no cars, not even wind. Just the distant echoes of something we couldn't see, and shadows that moved too fast between buildings. The Durango was parked in the upper garage level. Quinn and Elena pushed the barricade aside while I used a crowbar to wedge open the security gate. The scraping metal echoed like thunder. Every sound made my pulse spike. I imagined the infected turning their heads, drawn toward us like moths. May drove. She'd lived in Colorado longer than any of us and knew the side streets by heart. We kept the lights off. The route took us down Lincoln past the state capitol dome, then west through deserted intersections. Abandoned cars clogged some corners, and in the distance, small fires flickered from overturned trash bins and exploded fuel pumps. There were no police, no ambulances, just emptiness. On Grant Street, we saw our first body. It lay sprawled across the sidewalk, half covered by a torn windbreaker. It looked recent. The skin was still intact, the blood dark but not fully dried. I turned away. May didn't. Her eyes stayed on it for a second too long before she said, "That wasn't an infected." Quinn nodded. "Looks like a civilian, probably caught in the initial panic." We didn't stop. Near Mile High Stadium, we encountered our first threat. A roadblock of burned-out cars stretched across the 6th Avenue viaduct. We slowed to a crawl. The headlights, dimmed and covered with red filter tape, barely illuminated the way ahead. Shadows moved in the smoke, at least 6 figures. Too quiet, too still. We heard the snarl before we saw them. Quinn leaned out the window and fired a warning shot into the pavement. The sound was deafening. 2 of the figures charged fast, arms flailing, mouths wide. Their skin was tight over muscle, like they'd been drained of fat, eyes completely pale and mouth speckled with dark, dried blood. May gunned the engine. The Durango surged forward, and the bumper slammed into the lead figure. Its body hit the hood, cracked the windshield, and rolled off the side. I looked back and saw it twitching on the asphalt. We didn't stop. Golden was only 8 miles away, but that stretch felt like it took hours. At every turn we saw signs of collapse: jackknifed trucks, broken windows, blinking streetlights stuck in eternal yellow. and sometimes movement just at the edge of our vision. We arrived at the armory just before 6 a.m. The facility sat behind a reinforced chain-link fence with concrete barriers stacked around the perimeter. The front gates were open but unmanned. Quinn motioned for May to stop. We scanned the grounds. No bodies, no vehicles, no sign of a fight. "I don't like this," Quinn said, unbuckling his vest. "Too clean." Elena adjusted her radio. "Let's do this fast." We entered through the front door. The main lobby was dark, but the emergency lights still functioned, dim red strips along the floor. The air smelled stale, but not like decay. The flag in the entryway hung limp in still air. A directory on the wall pointed to the comm center, barracks, and armory vault. We cleared the main hallway, calling out and checking corners. No response. The communications room was intact. The generator still ran in backup mode, likely solar-fed with a battery buffer. The radio array blinked green. I dropped my pack and got to work. Booting up the system took 2 minutes. Routing power from the UPS system was a challenge, but I managed to get the frequency scanner online. The first signal came in weak, bouncing between channels. I locked onto 37.66 MHz, military band. "If you're receiving this..." Denver Metro compromised, fallback points redirected. All remaining units instructed to converge at Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The signal cut again. Quinn and Elena looked at each other. "That's NORAD," he muttered. "They're going black." "No one's coming," Elena said. We stayed silent for a long time. I tried sending out a return signal. It pinged, bounced, then returned with no handshake. The network was barely holding together. Still, we had a destination now, if we could get our people here. May walked to the window, scanning the horizon. "We need to go back." Elena turned to me. "Can you get the building's security doors open remotely?" "From here, no," I said. "But I can prep a signal burst. When we get close, I can trigger it." "We're running out of time," Quinn said. Then we heard it. A loud clang from the southern wall. A rattling, like something trying to break through the gate we came in from. May moved first. Quinn followed. I grabbed the tablet and packed my gear. Elena keyed her radio. "This is recon team from Capitol Annex. We found the Golden Armory intact, power stable, setting up fallback point. If anyone can hear this..." The wall exploded inward. A blur of movement. 2, 3, no, 4 of them. They'd followed our scent. Or maybe they'd just been waiting. The infected slammed into the room in a frenzy. Quinn fired 3 rounds before one reached him. The scream was short, sharp. May pulled Elena backward into the hallway. I turned and ran, following them past the barracks and into the emergency exit. I didn't look back. We sped down South Golden Road, tires screeching as May cut the wheel hard around an overturned bus and then righted us without a word. The infected we'd left behind shrank in the rearview mirror, but their distorted silhouettes didn't vanish. They stayed burned into my mind. The back of the SUV smelled like gunpowder and sweat, the acrid stench of discharged rounds lingering in the air. Elena pressed her shoulder to the passenger side door, hand clamped over a small gash in her arm. It wasn't from a bite, just torn skin from when she'd been shoved into the emergency exit frame. She wasn't panicking, but her eyes weren't tracking properly either. I could tell the adrenaline was burning out of her system fast. None of us spoke during the drive back into the city. It was still too early for sunlight to warm the horizon, but a dim gray light had taken hold of the sky, casting everything in a dead, metallic tone. Shadows lengthened as we re-entered Denver, passing silent rows of homes and shuttered storefronts. A traffic light blinked uselessly at a barren intersection. May didn't slow down, and I didn't ask her to. At one point, we passed a pickup truck wrapped around a streetlight. Its driver's side door torn off, windshield caved in. There was a red smudge down the concrete like something had crawled away or been dragged. By the time the Capitol dome came back into view, the streets were showing early signs of daytime chaos. We passed 2 civilians, just 2, running through a crosswalk, waving their arms at us, mouths open in silent pleas. We didn't stop. Elena looked away. I kept my eyes forward and held the tablet in my lap, ready to trigger the security gate override. As we neared the north entrance to the annex garage, I pinged the signal and watched as the barricade began to creak open, the motors wheezing as though they too had aged 100 years since we left. The vehicle rolled into the garage, and we slammed the gates shut behind us. Inside, everyone was waiting. Half were on edge, weapons raised at our approach until they recognized us and lowered them. The rest were clustered around makeshift supply piles or trying to stay close to the walls where it felt safer. The moment the vehicle stopped, I opened the door and stepped out, legs stiff from tension and cold. Elena followed, grimacing as she moved, and someone rushed forward to help her into a chair. Quinn's absence was noticed immediately. No one said his name, but the expressions on their faces shifted, and the silence that followed was confirmation enough. May knelt beside the floor maps, tracing the route we took with a red marker, then circled the armory's location with a thick, deliberate stroke. "The facility's intact," she said, finally breaking the silence. "Backup power is operational. Radio arrays work, but the signal's unstable. We heard a military broadcast, NORAD's going dark. They've redirected fallback points to Cheyenne Mountain, but they're not coming here." The weight of her words settled over the room like concrete dust. There was no cavalry, no airlifts, no evacuation corridor. The only hope we had was that armory, or the next 10 fallback points farther away than any of us could walk. Elena pulled herself upright. "We're evacuating, in groups, 15-minute intervals, smallest units first. Avoid drawing attention. Take alternate side streets. Our vehicle can run escort, but only for a mile or 2 before we need to return for the next group. It's risky, but staying here is suicide." The debate started before she could finish her sentence. Some argued to stay. The Capitol was built like a fortress and had been used as a command post during the Cold War. It had food, water, radio access. Why not reinforce the place, wait out the chaos? But those of us who'd seen the outside knew better. "It's a tomb," I said flatly. "You can't reinforce a building that's already compromised. The infected are learning. They're faster than they were 12 hours ago. They track sound movement. They don't wander aimlessly like in the old documentaries. If they surround this place, we'll die slow." I could feel the temperature in the room shift after that. Rationality cracked. Some people looked ready to cry. Others looked ready to punch a wall. Elena let the group air it out for a few more minutes, then started dividing people into departure units. I was assigned to drive the second wave, an escort for a group of 4 staffers, including Jay, the intern who'd been too afraid to volunteer for recon earlier. At 6:45 a.m., the first group left. I watched from the upper floor window as they exited through the side stairwell, moving in tight formation down the alley and across the open intersection. No shots, no movement. We waited. 10 minutes later, May's voice came through the radio. Tinny but clear. "First group secure. No contact. Returning vehicle now." Relief swept through the annex. But it didn't last long. The second group, mine, was ready at the garage within 5 minutes. We loaded into the Durango again, and I took the driver's seat this time. Jay sat behind me, fiddling with the pistol Elena had issued him. I made him put it away. He wasn't going to hit anything with it anyway, and the last thing I wanted was a panic discharge in a moving vehicle. This time, we took a more direct route. Less cover, more speed. I didn't like it, but we didn't have the time to play safe. As we approached the armory, I noticed new drag marks across the road, like something had been hauled from a wrecked sedan to the side of the building. No bodies. No signs of a firefight. Just absence. I dropped the second group off near the main bay door. They'd wait there until we had the third group inbound, then they'd move inside. Elena's plan was to stagger entry, reduce noise, minimize the risk of a horde keying in on sudden movement. It made sense in theory. On the way back to the capital, I noticed something else. The infected were beginning to group. At 7:30 a.m., just north of Sloan Lake, I saw a mass of at least 20 individuals gathered near a grocery store parking lot. Some were standing still. Some wandered in circles. One of them looked like it was twitching, like it was trying to communicate. I slowed the car briefly, trying to see better, but then one of them turned toward the sound of my engine. Just one. And then another followed. They didn't chase, they didn't sprint, but they tracked me. They were watching. Back at the annex, the third group was lined up, but everyone could tell something had shifted. The radio had gone quiet. Too quiet. The street outside had taken on that thick, humid silence that feels like a thunderstorm is coming. May met me at the garage entrance, eyes tense. "We've got a problem," she said, handing me a radio unit. "The last contact from Group 1 came 5 minutes ago. Static now. They were en route back, same path we took. They never made it." I scanned the nearby rooftops instinctively, my stomach turning. "We send someone to check?" "We don't have the manpower," Elena said behind me. "We can't waste time. If we lose more people, we don't get out of here at all." That was when the power cut out. All at once, lights, emergency beacons, ventilation fans, everything. The hum of the building died. The digital clock stopped. And then, faintly from the third floor, came a sound I hadn't heard since the outbreak began. A fire alarm, not the loud kind, just the local beeping from a smoke detector. It was immediately followed by a scream. Everyone froze. I took off running, heart in my throat. May and 2 others followed. We reached the stairwell and climbed to the 3rd floor, weapons drawn, breathing shallow. The hallway was filled with smoke, thin and gray. And something else. Blood. It streaked across the walls like someone had been dragged. Not fast, not in a struggle, just moved. Like someone was taking their time. We rounded the corner. Jay was standing in the hallway alone, gun in his hand, eyes wide. "It was inside," he whispered. "It was already in here." May moved first, sweeping her rifle left and right, eyes locked on the smoke at the far end of the corridor. I pushed forward, barely registering Jay's trembling figure as I passed him. The hall was drenched in a heavy silence, broken only by the shrill beeping of the smoke detector and the slow groan of something shifting just out of sight. Then it stepped into view, a figure in torn civilian clothes, mouth slack, blood smeared across its chin. Its movements were precise, unnatural in their grace. This wasn't like the others outside, staggering and erratic. This one's head tilted subtly as it took us in, as if assessing our threat level. Then it moved, not charging, not lunging, but advancing with a cold, terrible purpose. May didn't wait. 2 shots rang out from her rifle, dead center in its chest. The impact rocked it backward, but it didn't fall. It stumbled a step, straightened, and kept coming. I fired a single shot into its left knee, and this time it collapsed. But even then it tried to crawl forward, dragging its body like a machine stripped of mobility but not function. Jay screamed behind us, but I was already closing the distance. A second later, May put a round through the base of its skull. It stopped moving, but the hallway still felt hostile, like the threat hadn't left with the thing's last twitch. I crouched over the body, inspecting it quickly. The skin was pale and mottled, the mouth lined with cracked blood. But what caught my attention was the surgical scar running along its scalp. Something recent, clean, not infected, not caused by trauma. This thing had been operated on. "This wasn't a random," I said, rising to my feet. "Someone altered it." May nodded grimly. "It got in somehow, and it's not the only one." We radioed Elena, no response. Static hissed at us through the speaker, followed by a low-pitched click that didn't sound like interference. I tried again. Still nothing. "We need to get back to the garage," May said. "Now." Jay followed us down the stairs, pale and silent, still gripping the pistol like it might shatter in his hands. When we reached the garage, the lights were flickering. The backup generator had kicked in, but it was faltering. Half the room was cast in red emergency glow, the other half swallowed in shifting shadows. Elena was standing at the command table, surrounded by a small cluster of survivors, fewer than I remembered. She looked up as we entered and gave a sharp shake of her head. "They're breaching the lower level." For a moment, I didn't process what she meant. Then the air ducts above us rattled, once, sharply. Something scraped metal inside them. Not rats, not vibrations, movement, controlled, purposeful. "I thought the ductwork was sealed," I said. "It was," Elena replied. "At least, it used to be." Another sound echoed, this one louder. From the stairwell, a rhythmic, uneven pounding that grew closer with each step. The group tensed. A woman near the rear of the garage whimpered. Her husband wrapped an arm around her, whispering something I couldn't hear. Jay took a step back, pressing himself against the wall, and muttered under his breath. The pounding stopped. Seconds passed, then the door burst inward. 3 figures poured into the room, not staggering, not clumsy, but charging with brutal coordination. The first was in a security uniform. The second was barefoot, jaw dislocated, tendons visible beneath torn cheek muscle. The third was worse. Its eyes had been stitched shut with surgical wire, but it moved unerringly toward the nearest human target, arms extended, teeth bared. Gunfire exploded around us. I dropped the first one with 2 quick shots to the neck and temple. The second took longer. Someone missed, someone else hit it in the leg, and it kept coming until a round tore through its spine. The stitched one got within 6 feet of Jay before Elena tackled him out of the way and fired upward into its skull. It dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Everything went still again. A harsh breathing filled the air, more human than anything else. The survivors were shaking, stunned by the violence. We couldn't stay there. The capital had become a maze of entry points, too many to guard, too many to predict. This wasn't a defensive position anymore. It was a slaughterhouse with timers ticking behind every wall. "We're abandoning the building," Elena announced. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Right now, no more waves, everyone. Together." There was no argument, no room for one. We moved as a single mass, gathering everything we could carry: ammunition, radios, sealed food, the first aid kits we hadn't already used. The SUV was filled within minutes, but it wouldn't be enough. The rest would have to follow on foot. As we pushed out through the lower vehicle ramp and into the chill morning light, the city greeted us like an open grave. Smoke from the east curled into the sky, thick and black, rising from what looked like a collapsed office tower. In the distance, sirens still screamed, but now they sounded automated, triggered by failure, not rescue. We didn't go far. Just 3 blocks before we saw the first group from earlier, or what was left of them. Bodies torn, discarded like garbage near a row of dumpsters. One man was still alive, leaning against the wall, one hand missing, face unrecognizable. He didn't speak, just stared at us until his breathing stopped. May dragged the others forward. Elena was right behind her, gun held low, eyes scanning rooftops. I stayed at the rear, watching our flank. Jay hadn't said a word since the hallway. He kept close to the vehicle, too close, like the metal might protect him from the nightmare that had overtaken everything. We reached the armory compound by 8:10 a.m. The gate was locked. For one terrible second, we thought we were too late. Then a voice crackled over the speaker near the entrance. Mechanical. Distorted. Identify. Elena stepped forward. State Defense, Lieutenant Elena Morales. Capital Annex. Survivor Group. There was silence. Then the lock disengaged with a hydraulic hiss, and the steel gate split open. Inside, the building was dark. Not abandoned, but dim. Power was being rationed. Military cots lined the inner hallway. A man in uniform approached us, his face gaunt, eyes rimmed with fatigue. He didn't speak right away, just stared at us like we were ghosts. "Is this all?" he finally asked. Elena nodded. The man exhaled, barely audible. We were expecting more. So were we. He led us down into the facility, past sealed chambers and control rooms lit with amber glow. A command table was still active, displaying a real-time map of the surrounding city grid. Points of contact blinked red across the area. We counted 16 separate infection clusters. None had been contained. The officer explained they'd received partial data dumps from NORAD before the blackout. Something about genetic anomalies in the infected. Accelerated learning. Mutations that weren't consistent with known pathogens. Some moved faster than others. Some reacted to light, some to sound. And some, like the one with the sewn eyes, seemed to operate on something else entirely. He didn't say what. By 9 a.m., we had new orders. This facility wasn't a refuge. It was a launch point. We were part of a newly designated local control effort, whatever that meant. We were handed inventory sheets, surveillance data, and rough timetables of known breaches. No one told us to rest. No one told us we were safe. And none of us felt it anyway. As I sat in a converted storage room, back against a cold wall, I heard footsteps passing outside and the clink of gear being loaded for patrols. May passed by once, gave me a look and kept walking. Jay sat in the corner, arms around his knees, staring at the floor. I took the secure radio and keyed into the emergency channel just to see if anything had changed. Static, then a voice. Faint, broken, repeating over and over. "This is Regional Emergency Broadcast 1. All major cities are compromised. Do not return to populated zones. Repeat, do not return." And then silence. Day 1 was over. Day 2 would be worse. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.